The Convenience Store by the Sea by Sonoko Machida. Translated by Bruno Navasky. Chapter 5. Advent Calendar Cookies of Love and Longing. Kozai Nakao didn't believe in love. It might sound like an exaggeration, but it's true. He believed there was no such thing. Celebrity couples would talk about how destiny had brought them together, but then scarcely a year or two later they'd be tearing each other apart in a messy divorce. Meanwhile, just about every month one of his classmates would wail about how they had trusted this or that person and how wrong they had been. Social media was swimming with cheap declarations of love and longing, and the most trivial, everyday exchange between some elderly couple would prompt an absurd flood of comments from people about how moving it all was. Being manipulated by something as elusive as love is just stupid, Kozai muttered to himself. He was watching television. Out of curiosity, he had tuned into a romance reality show that the girls in his class had all been gushing over, but it left him cold. The show would end soon, one way or the other, and then a few years later each of the people on it would move on to different partners. He couldn't help but smile faintly at the thought. Don't be so cold-hearted, Kozai. Why can't you show a little more empathy? His mother, Mitsuri, spoke up from the kitchen. He thought she had been taking her bath, but she must have got out at some point. Mitsuri was wearing her favorite Snoopy pajamas and a pink terry cloth turban, and holding a bottle of the homemade detox water that she'd been obsessed with lately. She pursed her lips. Although I always get too hyped watching this sort of thing, you know what I mean? Mitsuri turned 40 this year, but even though she was getting up there in years, she dressed in loud, flashy clothes like a teenager, and what was with that hyped business? Suddenly irritated, Kozai turned off the television. It was a scene in which one of the girls was about to confess her love to someone. "Hey, wait," Mitsuri said loudly. "That was the best part. Why are you switching it off?" It was boring as hell, Kozai snapped, then returned to his room upstairs. Next to Kozai's room was his father Yasuo's study, and across the hall from that was his parents' bedroom. The door to the study was ajar, so Kozai peered in. Yasuo was happily tending to his fishing gear. There was a DVD of a fishing show that his father liked playing on the small television there. "You going fishing again?" Kozai asked, and Yasuo, noticing his son, looked up, beaming. "Well, winter is flounder season, of course, so I have to make sure you get some nice fried flounder for dinner, don't I?" Yasuo was a hardcore fishing fan who had wanted to be a professional angler when he was young. His free days were given over entirely to fishing, and more often than not, his daily catch graced the dinner table. He cleaned and cooked the fish himself, so Mitsuri was delighted with her easy evenings, as she called them, but Kozai wasn't as pleased. Meat was seldom seen in the house. He was on the verge of telling his father he would prefer fried chicken, but then gave up. It wouldn't make any difference anyway. "Don't you want to come with me?" "I told you, I'm not interested in fishing." It was an exchange they'd had many times before, but Yasuo had been persistent lately. Apparently, the son of a fishing buddy, a 6th grader, had made his fishing debut the other day. Yasuo was the one to take the commemorative photo of the boy and his father, holding the fish they had caught, and he had mentioned that he was very envious. "I want one of those too, Kozai." "Hey, What do you say? Let's go, shall we? Even if it's just the once. Sorry, but no thanks, Kozai thought. He had hated his father's hobby ever since he was young. The man had ditched family outings over and over for various reasons, but always something to do with fishing. Tidal conditions were particularly good, say, or he got a last-minute call to go out with a buddy. Mitsuri would take Kozai to Space World instead, or to some movie he had wanted to see, but he was always disappointed that they didn't go as a family. It felt somehow like the pleasure was incomplete. And when his father stood there afterwards, flaunting the fish he had just caught, asking if he had enjoyed himself, how could he even nod? He protested a few times, but Yasuo would just say, sorry, sorry. Eventually, Kozai gave up trying to detach his father from his rod and reel. Oh, it's already that late? Yasuo looked up at the wall clock. Time for bed. Kozai followed his father's gaze. It was just past 10 p.m. Yasuo's life generally ran like clockwork. He woke at 6 every morning and made breakfast. Mostly the menu was miso soup and a Japanese omelette. Sometimes bacon and eggs. He would eat them with rice bran pickles that he bought at Tanga Market, a shopping arcade in the city center, wash it all down with a cup of roasted hojicha tea, and then he'd be out the door on his way to work. He came home around 7 p.m. and had his bath, one beer, and dinner. Then he'd watch fishing DVDs in his study, tend to his fishing tackle, and by 10 p.m. he was off to bed. It was a healthy enough way to spend his days, thought Kozai, but on the other hand it was also exasperatingly boring. Aside from fishing, his father's life was completely lacking in sparkle. Well, I'm going to sleep. Good night. Yasuo tidied up and withdrew to his bedroom. At just about the same time, the aroma of coffee wafted up from downstairs. Kozai frowned reflexively. This was the start of his mother's golden time. His mother Mitsuri's day was disorderly in comparison with his father's. First of all, her wake-up time was hard to pin down. Yasuo would make breakfast for himself and leave for work. Then Kozai would wake up, eat his father's breakfast leftovers, and go to school. He and his father ate at the school cafeteria and company canteen, respectively, so no one had to make lunch, and Mitsuri's schedule followed her shifts at the convenience store. The daytime was devoted to household tasks and her job before she returned home in the evening. She made dinner, and after the meal she took a bath and tidied up. Starting at 10 p.m., it was golden time. Mitsuri would spread out her materials on the dining table and pass the time as she liked. Her bedtime varied according to the following day's schedule, but when she was in the zone, she sometimes disregarded schedules altogether and stayed up all night. Once Kozai got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet and heard a noise downstairs. He went down to see what was going on, and to his surprise, his mother was jumping around in such high spirits that he thought she was drunk. Mitsuri's hobby was manga. She liked to read them and to draw them. Although she said that she preferred drawing to reading, there didn't seem to be much difference. When she was reading a manga that she particularly liked, she became, at least in her son's eyes, hopelessly weird. She mumbled to herself in an incoherent voice, saying things like, "Isn't that fantastic?" or "Thank you very much." And when it seemed like she was settling down and getting into the story, her eyes would suddenly fill with tears. When she was done reading, she would shout, "I'm ready. Let's do it," and start scribbling away frantically. So, if he had to guess, Cozy Eye would say that reading and writing were inseparable to his mother. A lot of Mitsuri's favorite manga were romance-themed. Her bookshelves were full of volumes in all sorts of subgenres, from true love stories that make him squirm to romantic comedies. And then, he's not sure exactly what they were, but there was also a genre called boys love manga. In addition to all the physical books, his mother was really into online series as well. And then, she also posted her own manga online. It was a comedy called The Pharaoh Manager's Indecent Diary, whatever that meant, and it was always top ranked on some website. He didn't remember the name. Once, when she made it to the very top of the list for the first time, she started jumping around for joy, then took him out for Korean barbecue to celebrate. He liked that, but he also thought that it would have been good if she had made that the logical stopping point and given up the whole manga thing. It wasn't an appropriate obsession for a grown woman, Kozi thought, let alone a mother with a son in high school. His friend Koziki Daisuke's mother was into yoga. He heard she had become a certified instructor. He'd seen her a few times, and she was as slender and beautiful as a model. It wasn't that he wanted his mother to be exactly like her, but it had got to the point where he wanted to tell her anything but manga. It's a hobby you had to graduate from after middle school, surely. He had only read Mitsuri's manga once, but honestly, he failed to see what was so interesting about it. It was the story of a convenience store manager who was so overloaded with pheromones that all the people around him were at his mercy. The character was a mirror image of the store manager at Mitsuri's part-time job. There was definitely something funny about the guy, and when he looked at you, you got the feeling he was playing with your heart somehow, but other than that, he seemed normal. Cozy didn't understand why everyone around the manager got so worked up in the manga, and in his opinion, Mitsuri was just exaggerating it. When he'd said that to his mother, Mitsuri suppressed a laugh and said, "Well, you're still a child, you know," which annoyed him. So he told her flat out that her manga wasn't interesting, and she brushed him off with yes, yes, which annoyed him even more. He wanted to tell her that at her age she should know better than to get carried away just because some people said a few nice things about her dull manga, and that she shouldn't be so eager to hang out on a site like that just to feed her ego. But she'd probably just brush that off, too, so he swallowed his words. And also, why didn't his dad talk to her about it? She was his own wife. When she told him stories about the comments she received from high school students, or how some girl in her 20s covered Mitsuri's manga on her blog, he shouldn't just smile and nod. He should tell her to chill out. He only thought of his fishing obsession to start with, and if she did the same and just followed her own interests, it could lead to trouble between the two of them. About 10 days earlier, Cozy had started to think that something was going on with his mother. He tried to avoid her during her golden time, because it drove him crazy to see her like that, but when he needed something from the fridge, sometimes they ended up face to face. On the day it happened, he was studying for a test and had gone to make some coffee during a break, but Mitsuri was on the phone with someone. That was no big deal. She was always just getting worked up about something pointless, like Mr. So-and-so is a treasure, or that scene was really intense, so he didn't really pay much attention. But this time, her tone of voice was somehow different. I was thinking about you, she said. And then, it's about time. I just wish you had come to me sooner. The way she was giggling felt different from usual. He strained his ears in vain to try to hear the voice of the person on the other end of the line. Then the kettle started to whistle. Hurriedly, he turned off the stove, but Mitsuri said, "I'll call you again soon. Good luck," and hung up. Oh no. Cozy Eye, how long have you been standing there? Mitsuri pursed her lips. I just came down, Cozy Eye replied. Who was on the phone? He wanted to ask, but somehow he couldn't do it. Watching Cozy Eye make coffee in silence, Mitsuri said, "Do you want a cookie?" She handed him a star-shaped cookie that fitted perfectly in the palm of his hand. It was enclosed in a small, transparent bag, and the number 2 was printed in the center of the star. Before he could ask, Mitsuri said, "We're giving one to each customer up until Christmas." It was Nisiko's plan. I told you about our mysterious correspondent, didn't I? The Tenderness Advent Calendar cookie. We're going to have one a day until December 25th. We had some extras today. Not my thing, Cozy said, waving her off, and left the room. After that, Mitsuri quietly called someone on the phone nearly every day. Sometimes she would stifle her laughter or be sunk deep in a conversation, but when Cozy entered the room, she would always end the call in a hurry. She seemed to feel guilty about something, or at least she was acting strangely. Cozy became more and more suspicious. Could she possibly be having an affair? The story was that Yasuo and Mitsuri fell madly in love and got married soon after. 2 months after they met, they both realized they never wanted to be with anyone else and, ignoring their parents' protestations that they should wait a little longer to be sure, they made it official. Instead of staging a big wedding ceremony, they traveled around Asia for a month on an extended honeymoon. Even now, they had 3 volumes of photo albums on the living room shelf, full of pictures from the trip. When Cozy was in kindergarten, he used to look at the photos of the happy young couple on their travels instead of the usual children's picture books. "What's this one?" he would point and ask, and his parents would squint at the photo and tell him stories of their memories. "Oh, that one? Your father swallowed all the ice cubes in his juice." You see, the water they use to make ice in developing countries isn't very high quality, so you're not supposed to eat them. He got very sick to his stomach. It was terrible. They rushed him to the hospital and put him on intravenous fluids overnight. Mitsuri would tell the story happily, and Yasuo would nod. I had to take my 4 to the toilet with me, but they had run out of paper. It was much more interesting than any fairy tale. His parents had always got along well together. Cozy thought their relationship felt as natural and constant as his own name, which meant star. Even now, it didn't seem like they were in a crisis. He had never seen the two of them argue or even raise their voices in anger. But at some point a distance had opened between them. They each had their own separate hobbies and their own pleasures. No one looked at the photo albums anymore. They just sat on the shelf. So that's why she's having the affair. They were on their way home from school. Cozy Eye was speaking with some difficulty because his mouth was full of a steamed pork bun. That's still unconfirmed, his friend Koziki said, laughing. Your mom doesn't seem like that type. No, but they say when it comes to affairs, the innocent types are the ones who fall the hardest. What are you talking about? You sound like you want your mom to have an affair. He grinned and took a long drink from his bottle of warm green tea. When he exhaled, a long white trail appeared fleetingly in the frosty air and just as quickly disappeared. Holiday lights twinkled across the street. With Christmas almost upon them, the area around Majiko Station was beautiful. The grand facades of the old buildings were lit up all year long, but during this season they were next level and really captured the eye. When Cozy Eye was young, he used to badger his parents until they would take him to gaze at the nighttime city streets, awash in a sea of tiny grains of light. But now his feelings about it were somewhat dampened, and he looked bleakly at the scene before him. It's not like that, but, well, what if she really is having an affair? Cozy Eye stuffed the rest of the steamed bun into his mouth. It was the winter of his junior year in high school, and all his friends were excited about finding girlfriends to take on Christmas dates, so why did he have to be stuck worrying about this? Okay, but say your parents are having some issues. Why don't you just ignore them? You're old enough, Koziki said, stuffing the plastic tea bottle in a coat pocket. Cozy Eye felt a slight sense of shame at his words. Maybe he was being too emotional? He didn't want to come off as a mama's boy. Well, I just don't like being lied to, that's all. He stuck his hands in his pockets and looked away. He was sorry he had brought it up. Koziki was the most grown-up of all his friends. He was probably shocked that Cozy Eye was so dependent on his parents, not to mention the fact that he was being such a baby about it. As they walked, Cozy Eye stole a quick glance at his friend. They had been buddies since elementary school. Although Koziki was tall and physically fit, he said he wasn't the type to enjoy sports and instead had joined the Going Home Club. He was really into photography, and he was always reading magazines on the subject. He was good enough that he had won first prize in a newspaper photography contest when they were in middle school. Cozy Eye still remembered the prominently displayed photograph and interview in which his friend had frowned and said, "I'm not particularly happy about this one. If I could just have a little more self-confidence, like Koziki, maybe I wouldn't worry so much about these things." Deep in his pockets, Cozy Eye's hands clenched into fists. In middle school, Cozy Eye had played basketball. His hero was the point guard in a basketball manga that he was reading, and he'd trained like mad to be just like him. Cozy Eye himself was short and kind of a weakling, to be honest, but he could do anything if he worked at it hard enough. Or so he thought. As it turned out, he couldn't even get in the game, let alone the starting lineup. In his head, he could picture himself with the ball in his hands, dashing speedily this way and that, but on the real-life court, the coach was always yelling at him to run more, run faster. His teammates said not to worry about it, that he was the team mascot, but who'd be happy to hear that? He wanted to be the hero, not the mascot. When the final game of the season ended without a second of playtime for him, he decided he was done with basketball. In high school, he too joined the Going Home Club. He had no interest in sports outside of basketball and declined invitations to join other teams. Track and volleyball left him cold. Love is not the same as talent, he thought, but knowing that didn't help him much. When he gave up basketball, he started to feel like there was nothing that he could really call his own. Even if he didn't get in the game or wear a uniform, he had still been on the team before, actually a part of it, and that was over now. It wasn't like he was going to die or anything, but still, he felt lonely somehow. It had been 2 years since he quit, and the loneliness seemed to have soaked into him so deeply that he could no longer say with confidence that he knew who he was. After school, he would hang out with friends to kill time. At home, he'd play games on his phone or watch television. His game scores kept getting higher, and he had heard the same old material from the same old television personalities so often he was fed up with them. But he wasn't interested in becoming an entertainer himself, and he never reached #1 on the high score charts for the games. This kind of halfway life was just like it was with basketball, or actually, it was worse than that because he cared about it way less than basketball. Was he really that shallow a person? Hey, Kozuki said suddenly, pointing. Isn't that Misumi from your class? Kozai looked over and saw his classmate Mafuyu Misumi entering a familiar building. Oh yeah, maybe she has relatives there or something. Misumi had gone into the Golden Villa building. From the 3rd floor up, the building apartments were reserved for seniors. The ground floor housed the convenience store, where his mother Mitsuri worked part-time, along with a dry cleaner and one empty storefront. On the 1st floor, there was an osteopath's office, a dance studio, and some administrative offices. He couldn't think of any reason for Misumi to be there other than to visit a resident. I've seen her go in there before. She doesn't live here, does she? That's an old folks' home. I'm pretty sure she doesn't. The two of them stopped and looked up at the building. Then a gust of winter wind hit them, and Kozai shivered. It's cold. I should have got something hot to drink too. The steamed bun hadn't warmed him up very much. Okay, Kozuki. Let's go. Kozai said with a little more urgency, and they hustled home. It was Mitsuri who revealed later why Misumi was going into the Golden Villa building. A student from your school started part-time at our store. Her name was, let me see. I think it was Misumi. Kozai was at the dinner table with his parents. He put down his miso soup. Misumi? Was it Mafuyu Misumi? Right, that's the younger one's name. Her grandmother is on the 4th floor, and apparently they're living together now. She said she was glad to have a 0-minute commute to work, and her grandmother is happy too. What's she living with her grandmother for? Asked Kozai. I don't know, Mitsuri responded. The manager said she was a nice, attentive kid. She continued. We're always shorthanded during the holiday season, so I'm sure it will be helpful. Hey, how well do you know her? She's a classmate, he said tersely, and Mitsuri let out an amused chuckle. Would you mind if I tell her that I'm your mother? It's going to come out whether I mind or not, so it doesn't really matter. Kozai bit into a cream croquette and thought about Misumi. She'd been in his class since 10th grade, but they hadn't spoken much to each other. She was short and seemed a little temperamental. He had a strong image of her sitting in the corner of the classroom, reading a bulky book. He also had the feeling someone, Maybe his friend Kakita had said that she was his type, but he didn't recall her looks with any detail. He didn't spend a lot of time staring into the faces of girls he barely knew. It doesn't really matter. Does that mean you're not interested? Mitsuri said, trying to sound casual. I think it's fine, Yasuo interjected. If it were a girl he liked, he'd probably do everything he could to stop you from talking to her. Isn't that right, Cozy Eye? I don't know. There was no particular girl that Cozy Eye liked. When he looked at idols and models, he thought they were cute enough, obviously, and sometimes he was even a little jealous of the people that dated them. He vaguely imagined that someday he'd fall in love with someone, but it was like they were on the other side of the ocean, and there was no way to get across. Once, at his middle school graduation, a student on the girls' basketball team called him over and confessed, "I really like you, Cozy Eye." She was a small forward on the girls' team, and her face had turned bright red. She had beautiful form when she was shooting, and sometimes she caught his eye during practice. She was cute and she was kind, and the rest of the team relied on her. It made him happy that a girl like that would even look at him, but she was a better player than he was, and he couldn't live with that. He turned her down. He said it was because he liked someone else, but he wanted to cry almost as soon as the words left his mouth. It was so petty of him. If she hadn't been a basketball player, he would have accepted her affection gladly. It was pathetic of him to have pushed her away just because she was better than he was. But he just couldn't handle it somehow. He didn't see her again until the beginning of his first year in high school. She had gone to a different school, but he ran into her one day, walking down the street with some tall guy. They were holding hands. When she noticed Cozy Eye, she waved casually to him. "This is my boyfriend," she said happily. "He's on the baseball team." As she told him all about the boy, how he was working so hard to become a regular in the lineup, she looked so cute that Cozy Eye couldn't help but remember how much he'd loved to watch her. When he was cheering for his team from the bench, she would always tell him, "You can get in there, too." Nobody else ever said anything like that. She was the only one. Why hadn't he realized that earlier? Could he only see it now that she was with someone else? What a self-centered fool he was. He didn't really understand what it meant to love someone. If he could be so callous, thinking only of how he looked to others, how could he properly love anyone? If love was as pure and beautiful an emotion as they said in all the manga and television dramas, then he felt like he was fated to spend eternity without it. Then came the suspicions of his mother's affair. His parents still seemed to believe that love existed, even if any sparkle of romance was gone from their relationship. Still, it looked like his mother was having an affair. He didn't know what to believe anymore. A few days later, Cozy Eye dropped by the Tenderness store where Mitsuri worked. His friend Kozuki accompanied him. Usually they frequented a different shop, but there was a photography magazine that Kozuki wanted, and it was only available there. According to Cozy Eye's mother, some of the building residents were photography enthusiasts. The magazine section was designed to reflect the building residents' interests, and it was surprisingly interesting, including everything from gardening to traditional dance, with weekly variety magazines and even picture books. Things you wouldn't even know where to look for in a regular bookshop. Obscure publications on theater appreciation, for instance, were piled up in stacks as if they were commonplace items. Cozy Eye snagged a few things to take home as after-dinner snacks and a bottled soft drink. Shiba, behind the checkout counter, noticed him and said hello, flashing him a smile. "It's been a while. How are you?" "Yeah, well." Cozy Eye observed the store manager as he spoke. He was just a normal, heartthrob type, he thought. The manager's older brother was the totally cool one, a junk collector with a shaggy beard. His name was Tsugi, Mitsuri had told him. Cozy Eye couldn't grow any sort of beard, but in a few years he'd probably be able to, and then he'd let it run wild, like Tsugi did. "Oh, Misumi, this is Mitsuri's son." Shiba called out to one side, and a face peered out from behind the hot foods. Spying Cozy Eye, she said, "Oh, yeah, he might be in my class at school, I think." "What? Are you serious?" In disbelief, Cozy Eye's voice went up a notch. What did she mean by that when they were in the same space, face to face, every single day? "We've never had a conversation before," Misumi said, in an indifferent voice. "I don't even think we've ever said hello." "Nakao, you don't know me very well, either." Cozy Eye faltered for a moment, then said, "That may be true, but—" He raised his voice. "That's true, but still, we've been in the same class since 10th grade. "Really? Is that right?" It seemed to make no difference to her one way or the other, and that bothered Cozy Eye. Maybe he didn't particularly stand out in class, but he wasn't invisible either. Didn't she see him at volleyball during intramural sports the other day? He had spiked the ball twice, evading blocks by actual members of the varsity team. He had helped his class win the championship and was even picked for MVP. But Misumi just squinted at him and tilted her head like his face was unfamiliar to her. "Don't worry about it, Cozy Eye. I understand Misumi's eyesight isn't so good," Shiba said, chuckling. "Now she works here part-time. She can afford new contact lenses, right?" "Yes, sir. I'm doing my best. Just because her eyes are bad, that doesn't mean we're strangers." Cozy Eye was still sulking when Koziki came over, magazine in hand, and asked him what was wrong. He jerked his finger in Misumi's direction. "They said she's working here." "Who, Misumi?" Koziki looked over at her, and Misumi's eyes opened wide. "Oh, Koziki, right? How do you know Koziki, then?" Cozy Eye asked, aggrieved. "He's not even in our class." "Because he's famous, obviously." "Hey," she turned and said to Koziki, "I thought that photo of yours was really awesome. It's incredible that a dog could make a face like that." She was talking about the photo that won the newspaper contest prize. It had captured a dog looking directly into the lens of the camera. It was Koziki's write-up more than the photo itself that had left an impression on Cozy Eye, so he didn't remember the image in great detail. But after all these years, Misumi seemed to remember even the composition of the photo in detail. "It was so adorable that when I looked at it, my heart started to hurt," Koziki coolly said, "Right? Thanks." The boys paid for their items, Cozy Eye at Shiba's register and Koziki with Misumi. "Your mother is always very helpful, putting up with all my selfish demands about her shifts," the manager said. "Oh, okay. Oh, and here, have an advent calendar cookie." The cookie with the number 13 on it was cocoa-colored in the shape of a Christmas tree. He took one, thinking about what his mother had said about Nisiko's plans, but then an angry voice cut in. Whatever. I don't care. He looked over. Koziki was glaring at Misumi. Leave me alone. I don't want to hear any more about it. Oh, sorry, she said. Cozy-Eye watched open-mouthed as Koziki snatched his items roughly from Misumi's hands. Realizing he was being watched, Koziki said, Cozy-Eye, I'm leaving, and stalked out of the store. Koziki, wait. Cozy-Eye ran after him. What's the matter? Nothing, Koziki replied curtly. It's not nothing. You never get this mad. Koziki stopped suddenly and took a deep breath. Then he bowed his head slightly and said, Sorry, I got a little annoyed. Don't worry about it, but what happened? Misumi was being a little pushy. Koziki had returned to his usual calm self. She wanted me to join the photography club or something like that. Uh-huh. Cozy-Eye nodded in understanding. Since he'd won the prize, Koziki hadn't taken any photographs. Cozy-Eye had asked him about it just once, and all he would say was, I don't feel like it. He still liked photography, he said, but he didn't feel like looking through the viewfinder any longer. Cozy-Eye understood that feeling completely. He still loved basketball, and he went wild watching NBA games, although he couldn't imagine holding the ball himself anymore, no matter what. If someone talked to him the same way about basketball, he'd probably get mad too, he thought, so he gave Koziki a couple of gentle pats on the back. Koziki smiled slightly and nodded. Anyway, that guy has an amazing power, Koziki said, as if he had just remembered, and then, half to himself, I just don't understand why he's working at that convenience store. Who, Mr. Shiba? Cozy-Eye asked. What kind of power? Is there something wrong with the convenience store? Koziki laughed at the questions. You don't have enough experience points for that. And you don't know what you're talking about. Cozy-Eye was certain that he was being mocked, although he wasn't sure exactly how. He huffed and puffed a little, and then realized Koziki would just laugh at him all the more, so he quickly decided to let it go. My mom's always saying stuff about him, like he's got pheromones or some kind of charm, but is that actually true? I don't think so. I don't feel anything like that around him. That's why I said you don't have the experience points. But listen, that's not necessarily a bad thing, Koziki said, slipping the magazine into his bag. It's a little like the sense of smell, maybe. Some people have better noses than others. Take Tabuchi, for instance. He can tell right off the bat what perfume a girl is wearing, but to you and me it could be any perfume or soap or whatever. We don't have the faintest idea. But if we picked up some life experience by smelling a lot of different things, we'd probably start to figure it out, don't you think? Sure, I guess. Tabuchi was in Koziki's class. He was known as the Demon King among the boys and had maintained a long string of girlfriends stretching back as far as elementary school. He had the uncanny ability to recognize someone's scent just in passing, and all the girls doted on him. Of course, the fact that he had the sweet face of a model was probably a big factor in all that, but Cozy-Eye thought the way he paid attention to small details was also important and watched him with some admiration. To a person with the right nose, Shiba's type gives off a strong smell. If Tabuchi met Shiba, he'd probably be impressed. So that's how it works? He had never really noticed a girl's scent, and to be honest, he wasn't particularly interested in doing so right now, so no wonder he didn't seem to understand what made Shiba so great. Satisfied, Kozuki let out a little chuckle. Somehow, his mood seemed to have improved. Kozi, you're fine the way you are. Innocence is a virtue. What the hell? I'm giving you a compliment. But maybe that's it, Kozuki says, as if he'd just realized something. Maybe Misumi's nose doesn't do that either. She was standing right next to Shiba, looking cool, calm, and collected. She's like your mum. They aren't the types to get off on that smell. Cozy, I thought about the scene earlier. Misumi had seemed a little tense about something, probably because she wasn't used to the new job yet, but she didn't seem to have any special feeling towards Shiba. Isn't that normal? Cozy, I asked. Normal, Kozuki looked up at the night sky and repeated the word, as if talking to himself. Normal was a strange word, wasn't it? Normal was actually different for everyone. Kozai looked briefly at Kozuki, his breath turning white in the cold air. He was a good guy, Kozai thought. Although he would never say it out loud, he wanted to be more like him. Kozuki had a depth to him that Kozai had never managed to achieve. They had been together since elementary school, and it felt like they had grown up in similar ways, although Kozuki had quickly outstripped him in height, and then he was also better looking. I would choose Kozuki over Tabuchi, no contest. Mifuyu Misumi may have had bad eyesight, but she had a good eye. Kozai was impressed when he thought about how Misumi tried so hard to share her impressions of Kozuki's photograph with him. Kozuki was a calm, quiet guy who didn't stand out at school. When he won the photo contest, of course, everyone's eyes were on him, but that was years ago, and now even the people who went to the same junior high school had forgotten about it. It was amazing that Misumi remembered it so clearly, and on top of that, she even knew that he wasn't taking photos anymore. Maybe Misumi liked Kozuki? Kozuki, well, is there a girl you like? Kozai asked, with no particular reason in mind. Kozuki gave him a surprised look. That's an unusual question, he said. Yeah, thought Kozai. It was the first time he'd ever asked a question like this. Why are you randomly asking me that? It's nothing. I was just thinking that if you had a girlfriend, we wouldn't be able to walk home from school together like this, would we? Since they'd enrolled in high school, Kozai had gone to school and home again with Kozuki nearly every day. Kozuki had a wealth of knowledge, and conversations with him were easy and fun. At times they were even exciting, and he was a good friend, Kozai thought. Perhaps he imagined that if Kozuki were to find someone special, he might be left behind, and that made him lonely. When he thought about it, there was little chance that a girl would overlook a great guy like Kozuki. Actually, I don't know why I asked that. Kozuki let out a deep breath. Well, I don't really want a girlfriend. Why not? Kozai was surprised at the definite assertion. I mean, I don't really know. I can't imagine having someone like that who's always at my side. Oh, I get that. I'm the same. Kozai brightened up a little and smiled. He felt that he and Kozuki had become just a little bit closer. When he arrived at school the next day, Kozai was informed that his class had been temporarily suspended. Apparently, half the group was off sick with the flu. After complaining for a while with the rest of his classmates about how they should have been told sooner, Kozai decided to go home. "I wish they had canceled our entire grade," Koziki complained. The number of cases in Koziki's class had been under the limit, so he had school as usual. Kozai boarded the train on his own and soon arrived at Majiko Station. But on his way out of the station house, Kozai had a real shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. There, walking down the street in front of the station, was his mother, and she was with a man he had never seen before. The man seemed slightly younger than Mitsuri and was wearing subdued clothing, a black down jacket, jeans, and black trainers. Mitsuri was wearing a long down jacket and, over it, her favorite crossbody bag. The two of them seemed friendly, but there was a certain distance between them. You could even say they had the feel of a new couple. "I don't believe it." Was this the moment he had been dreading? His head spun as if oxygen wasn't getting to his brain. It felt like his legs might give out under him if he wasn't careful. What should he do? Should he run up to the two of them and demand to know the nature of their relationship? But then what if they apologized to him or something like that? He wouldn't know what to say. Oh, if only Koziki were there. He would have told him what to do. "What are you doing?" He heard a voice and turned with a start. There was his classmate Misumi, in a pea coat with a scarf wrapped around her neck. She frowned. "You're blocking the exit. Then, are you feeling sick?" "No, it's not that He didn't know what to say. He struggled for words, but Misumi said, "Okay, whatever. Bye." She tried to squeeze past him. Kozai grabbed at her scarf and said, "Sorry. Can you just stay here for a minute? I can't figure out what to do." Koziki wasn't there, and Kozai needed someone right now. Someone to help him get through this. He couldn't handle it alone. "What?" Misumi turned back to Kozai. "Has something happened?" "Happened? No, it's, something I saw, or something that's going on, I guess." "I have no idea what you mean." Misumi let out an exasperated sigh. Her manner was completely different from when she was speaking with Koziki, which annoyed him momentarily, but he quickly reminded himself that this wasn't the time to be critical. "Listen, okay? You know my mom, right?" "Oh, Mitsuri, you mean?" "Right, well, I caught her. Having an affair, I think. Just now." Kozai said, as if it were being wrung out of him. "Eek." Mitsuri let out a little shriek. "What? Are you serious?" "I'm serious. I think. What should I do?" "Which way did they go?" "By car?" "On foot." Misumi scanned the area as she spoke. "On foot," he said. "Which way?" she repeated and took Kozai's hand. He was surprised by the strength of her grip. "Hey, I guess you can't do this alone." She gave his hand a tug. "I'll go with you. Come on." "Thanks." For the first time, Kozai took a good look at Misumi's face. Cool, elegant eyes, a small nose. Her features were more beautiful than cute. Her earnest expression had something kind about it that gave Kozai a slight feeling of relief. They went that way." Misumi nodded and started walking, half a step ahead of Kozai. Looking at their tightly clasped hands, He wondered how this could be happening to him. He meant the trouble with his mother, of course, but also he couldn't believe he was walking hand in hand like this with a classmate whose existence he had only the vaguest grasp of until just the other day. Or that she'd be taking care of him like this. Oh, there they are. Hearing his mother's voice, he quickly scanned the pavement ahead of him. He spotted the two from behind, talking as they walked. The man had a large paper bag in his hand and was wearing a bashful smile. Mitsuri, too, seemed to be enjoying herself. It was the same smile he had seen 100 times at home, but somehow the sight of it directed at this man he had never seen before made him shudder. And then the two of them, side by side, walked into the premier Hotel Majiko. A hotel. No. So it was true. Cozy Eye almost collapsed on the spot, but Misumi said, "Come on now, let's go." Go and do what at this point? He felt like he might cry. He didn't want to see his mother in a place like this. We don't know for sure yet. Misumi looked up at the hotel, which was modeled after a ship. If you're having an affair, you don't come to a place like this, she said flatly. It's too public. You meet in an out-of-the-way place, not where you live. Surprised by her decisive tone, Cozy Eye looked at her, and she smiled back reassuringly. His heart skipped a beat. I don't think Mitsuri is the type of person to have an affair. I've only known her for a short time, but I get her. So let's go. Misumi gave a quick tug on Cozy Eye's arm. He stood up reluctantly. I've got no choice, he said, as if trying to convince himself. If this is how it is, I've got no choice. Affair or not, I have to see it through. Yes, that's right. Let's go. Misumi gave his arm another tug, and the two of them entered the hotel. Inside, the splendid lobby was awash with Christmas colors. Cozy Eye fidgeted awkwardly, feeling that two uniform-clad high school students were a little out of place there, but Misumi paid no heed to the elegant surroundings. She simply dropped her voice and said, "Over there." Mitsuri and the man were heading straight for the staircase. Cozy Eye had thought they'd go to the front desk first, but Mitsuri said, "Come on," and with her urging him on, they followed stealthily behind as the couple entered an Italian restaurant on the second floor. Huh, a restaurant. I wonder if we can get in without them noticing. Excuse me, can we sit anywhere we want? I'd like a quiet table, please. Misumi called out to the staff and entered the restaurant confidently. She took a seat at a table next to the wall, a small distance from the couple they were following. Wait, Misumi. He hurried after her and with complete composure, Misumi said, "Sit down now, quickly. Also, hold your head up. People will notice you if you act like you're sneaking around." Oh, okay. He sat as he was told, and Misumi took a careful look behind her. Mitsuri is facing the other way, so she can't see us. We're okay. Misumi looked around. It's still a little early for lunch, but it's going to keep getting busier, and then I think will be much harder to spot. Misumi, have you done this before? Cozy Eye couldn't help but ask. He knew it wasn't his business, but she just seemed too sure of herself. Well, I have some experience. We'll have 2 of the pasta lunch specials, please. You have to choose a main course. I think I'll have the cod and turnip Alfredo. What will you have, Nakao? Cozy Eye took a menu from the waiter, who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere and tried to order. Well, the pepperoncino pasta? Once the waiter had departed, he turned back to Misumi. Experience, he asked. My mother was having an affair. Around this time last year, I was following her around all the time. I wanted to be sure, so I was gathering evidence. Misumi spoke casually, as if it were a matter of no importance whatsoever. She removed her scarf and coat and dropped both into a small basket that the waiter had placed next to the table for them. My mother only stayed in love hotels. She would never use a local hotel like this, where you never know who you're going to run into. What? Asked Cozy Eye flustered. Wait, why are you telling me all of this? It was too much for Cozy Eye. But then Misumi said, that's all over now, so don't worry about it. Besides, it's only fair, since you told me all this stuff about your family. Huh? No, that's... He didn't know how to respond. He rubbed his head in confusion. Your mother and mine are completely different people, Misumi said. Maybe it's because Mitsuri has enough time for herself? She gives the impression that she's satisfied with her family, but also personally. People like that don't have affairs. Misumi put the cold glass of water to her lips briefly, then continued. A lot of people are unfulfilled in life, she explained. The really pathetic ones look for love wherever they can find it, cheating and having affairs. Looking at that cold face, Cozy Eye thought about Misumi's past. He wondered what kind of sadness had to be buried there, that she would dismiss her mother as pathetic that way. Before too long, food had arrived at both tables. Eating his pasta without tasting it, Cozy Eye peered at his mother. She seemed to be enjoying the conversation, but there was something a little awkward about her manner. Misumi was watching them the same way. I knew it. It's definitely different, she said. Intimacy? They don't have anything like that. But maybe it's because they just started seeing each other. I don't think so. When dessert and coffee arrived, there was a new development at Mitsuri's table. The man took a tablet out of his bag. The two of them put their faces close together to look at something on the screen. As their faces drew near, Cozy Eye let out an involuntary gasp. No. Misumi instantly covered his mouth. Your voice is too loud, she hissed in his ear. So far, they haven't done anything that's not normal. Whoops. Sorry. Her hand was touching his lips. Hastily, he pulled back. Hiding his embarrassment, he returned to watching the pair at the other table and quickly settled himself down. The man was gazing at Mitsuri earnestly. Mitsuri seemed oblivious to this and just kept talking, her eyes fixed on the tablet. What are you doing, Mum? Oh, someone's coming. Misumi briefly raised her voice and Cozy Eye looked over. A second man approached his mother's table and sat down heavily in an empty seat. What? Sugi? This time Cozy Eye's voice rose to full volume. The three people at the table instantly looked at him. Oh, Cozy Eye? Mitsuri looked over in surprise, then smiled in satisfaction. It can't be. What, are you on a date? Don't be stupid. At Mitsuri's question, devoid of guilt or anxiety, Cozy Eye's voice got even louder. Heads at the surrounding tables all turned their way, and noticing the attention, Misumi scolded him. Shoo. Too loud. He hastily shut his mouth, bobbing his head apologetically in all directions. "Sorry, Misumi." "Hello, aren't you Mitsuri's son?" said Tsugi. "Why don't you join us?" Tsugi beckoned them over, and at his invitation, Kozai and Misumi switched tables. The man who had been eating across from Mitsuri moved over next to her, looking a little put out. Seemingly unconcerned, Mitsuri just giggled to herself, looking happily back and forth between Kozai and Misumi. "Now, this is a surprise. I had no idea you and Misumi were so close. And shouldn't you both be in school? Are you looking for trouble, mister?" His mother put on a show of mock anger, but she couldn't hide her amusement. Kozai responded fiercely. "This is about you, Mum. What are you doing here?" Mitsuri said, "Oh, right. I haven't introduced you." She gestured towards the man sitting next to her. "This is my apprentice, Yoshiro Kiriyama." "Huh? Your apprentice?" Kozai had no idea what she meant. He frowned in confusion. "Mr. Kiriyama draws manga, like I do," Mitsuri said, with evident pride. "He wanted to distribute his work more broadly, so I'm coaching him on how to share it online." Kiriyama bowed his head in grateful acknowledgement. The details emerged. It seemed that Kiriyama now lived in Oita, but he had originally been a regular at Tenderness, and so he and Mitsuri had become acquainted. From the time he was a child, he had wanted to be a manga artist, but things hadn't gone so well for him. He thought he should probably quit, but he couldn't bring himself to give it up, and so had been fretting about how to find a few readers for his work. At that time, Tsugi, who was acquainted with both of them, had suggested he ask Mitsuri for help. "She's not a pro," he said, "but she draws manga and she's active online." "I didn't know the first thing about any of that," said Kiriyama. "I had been really obsessed with drawing by hand, so I didn't even know how to use a digital pen and tablet. Ms. Nakao was tutoring me every evening, and I was learning, more or less, but still, there were a lot of things that were hard to understand over the phone, so finally she was kind enough to spare me some time in person." Speaking shyly, Kiriyama explained that he was friendly not just with Tsugi, but also his brother Shiba, and that this evening he would stay at Shiba's place. Then, to Kozai's complete surprise, Mitsuri added that her husband Yasuo also knew of today's meeting. "Mr. Kiriyama said he really wanted to see my work set up, so we invited him over for dinner. Your father is very excited to take him fishing." He had thought his father was just working as usual, but it turned out he'd taken the day off to go fishing. To the stunned Kozai, who hadn't known any of this, she said simply, "I thought if I told you, you'd just make a face. I figured you'd probably just say manga again, Mum. So I decided not to mention it until the last minute." "That's what you'd say, right?" Well, maybe." With everyone's eyes on him, now Kozai looked down at the table. "It seems you don't approve of your mother's activities, do you?" Kiriyama said gently. "Personally, I think it's wonderful that she didn't give up on the thing that she loved all her life, and that she can still take pleasure in it. That's incredible. And on top of that, other people love what she does. Have you read the comments on your mother's work? I'm looking forward to the next installment. I can't wait. They go on forever. It's incredible that so many people depend on something that your mother drew. You could even call it a miracle." Kiriyama's passion grew as he spoke. Watching him, Cozy Eye had a funny feeling. It was the first time he had ever seen anyone praise his mother this way. Also, he had no idea that his mother had loved manga since she was a child. He knew she was a good artist, but he had never thought about why she started drawing manga. He'd always imagined it was something she had just sort of stumbled upon. So when had his mother started her manga work? "Ms. Mitsuri, you draw manga?" Misumi asked. "That's right," Mitsuri said, "but for various reasons, I don't talk about it much." "You won't tell anyone, will you?" She tapped a few times on the tablet and passed it to Misumi. "This is it." "No way," Misumi exclaimed. "This is you?" "It's one of my favorites. I really love it. I follow all the updates." "Really, Misumi? You're serious?" asked Mitsuri. "Wait, that can't mean that you know who is the Pharaoh manager." "Yes, he's the one." "Uh-huh, that's top secret, isn't it?" "Oh, wait, so is Ao also a real person then? The puppy dog hairdresser?" "Haha, it's a secret." Misumi was getting so excited, she seemed like a different person. She grabbed Cozy Eye by the shoulder. "Mitsuri is fulfilled," she said. "She's got it all." "I don't get it." "What? You really don't understand?" Mitsuri's manga is super popular, but more than that, it's fun. If you read it, I think you'll have more respect for your mom. But also, I don't think you'll worry anymore. "I read it once, but I didn't really get it," he confessed. Misumi shook her finger at him. "That's no good," she said, frowning. "You only read one episode. You gave up too soon. You have to read at least 5. "Thank you," said Mitsuri and smiled as if Misumi understood her. Kiriyama sighed, looking a little envious, but said, "That's nice, isn't it? Being able to meet a real fan like that is the best thing in the world." Sugi just watched and grinned. What in the world? Cozy Eye thought to himself. What was happening here? But he was relieved that Mitsuri wasn't having an affair. That evening, not only Kiriyama but Misumi, too, showed up at the Nakao household. Well, is this Cozy Eye's girlfriend?" Yasuo looked at Misumi happily, and in high spirits got busy in the kitchen preparing his daily catch. In the living room, Kiriyama, Misumi, and Mitsuri were in front of the computer, excited about something. Mitsuri seemed even happier than usual and couldn't stop smiling. "Hey, Dad. Did you know that Mom has always been into manga?" Cozy Eye was sitting at the kitchen counter, watching the 3 of them from afar. "Yes, that I knew," his father said. "When we first met, she wanted to be a manga artist. But we got together, and then we got married, and soon enough, you came along. So she gave it up. She said she'd focus on raising you until you were bigger." "Why?" Cozy Eye asked, surprised. Was his father saying it was because of him that she quit? Well, obviously, his father said in a slightly exasperated tone, "It must have been because you were so adorable, don't you think? From the time you were born, you were a little sickly. Also, you didn't nurse well, you didn't sleep, and, well, anyway, it was a lot of work. If she was going to bring you up properly, there would be no room for manga." Cozy Eye hadn't known any of that. Seeing his amazement, his father said, "You started playing basketball late in elementary school, you know? From then on you got much stronger, and you fell in love with the sport. In middle school, the love turned into real dedication, and from then on, we didn't get to go out much as a family. Yasuo looked a little nostalgic. He cut and trimmed the flounder in front of him with well-honed skill. It looked like he was going to deep fry part of it and make a soup with the rest. Your first year of middle school, I invited you to come with us on our New Year's visit to the local shrine, but you had an important basketball practice that you wanted to do instead. Your mother told me then, and there she thought it was time for her to start having some fun pursuing her own interests again. Cozy Eye said nothing, just watched his father work. It was true he had been obsessed with basketball and had definitely put the team before everything else in his life. It's unexpectedly difficult to keep doing what you love, Yasuo said. Look around you. Those who care enough to risk anything real for what they love are actually surprisingly few. First of all, it's very rare just to discover that you feel that way about anything. And when you do, the environment and circumstances you need to devote yourself to it are fairly hard to find. Maybe you also need talent, right? Most people get frustrated and think, it's no good, I've gone as far as I can go. Then they quit. Cozy Eye looked at the palm of his own hand. Since he had given up basketball, the skin on his hands had become much softer. Even though he had loved playing the game with a passion, he had let it go because he didn't have the talent. His parents hadn't said anything about it to him, but that was probably because they knew how difficult it would be for him to continue. Back then, I told your mother I'd quit fishing for a while, too, but she said it would be wrong for us both to give up the things we loved. Instead, she told me I had to support her without complaint when the time came for her to start doing manga again. I'm lucky to be able to do what I want, as much as I want, Yasuo said, putting half of the flounder into a pot. The broth that he had made of soy sauce and dashi stock was beginning to simmer. Cozy Eye took a deep breath, inhaling the pleasant aroma, and looked over at Mitsuri. When his father went fishing, his mother never made a fuss about it. Eating fish for dinner night after night, she never protested. Was that her way of supporting his father's interests? And then, when his father went to bed at 10 p.m. sharp, that must have been a sign that he supported Mitsuri's activities as well. It makes me happy to see your mother happy, Yasuo said earnestly. Cozy Eye looked at him, but Yasuo was gazing fondly at Mitsuri. The look in his eyes was no different from the times when they used to look at the photo albums together. There was still something unchanged between his father and mother. At that thought, a warm feeling spread through Cozy Eye's chest. And respect, too, for this couple who had held fast to the things that they loved. There must have been times when they were frustrated or fed up, but they'd found a way to stay happy. I wonder what it will be like for me. Will I ever want to pick up a basketball again? Or will I find something new and fall in love with that? If I do, will the empty place inside me be filled and my self-confidence return to me? That would be good, he thought. Yasuo began to sprinkle potato starch on the remaining flounder. Watching his father's familiar movements, Cozy Eye asked, "Next time you go fishing, will you take me?" Yasuo looked up quickly. "You'll go with me?" he asked, with a small quiver in his voice. "Well, maybe once." "Yes? Well, that's very nice indeed." He repeated this last several times, then started to hum a little tune. After the meal was over, Misumi said, "I have to go home, or my grandmother will start to worry." Kiriyama had offered to take her back to the Golden Villa building, since he was staying there too, but he and Yasuo had got on so well that they were quite busy pouring each other drinks. Kiriyama made as if he would try to wind up the session, but Misumi just laughed and said, "Don't worry, I can get home on my own." She was getting herself ready to go when Cozy Eye stood up, saying, "Well, in that case, I'll see you off myself." "Take her home properly," Mitsuri said, watching them, and the two of them left the house. "Look how beautiful the sky is," said Misumi to Cozy Eye, who was shivering in the cold wind. He looked up at the clear winter sky spread out above him, stars twinkling. "That's true, it is beautiful," he said, and meant it. It had been a long time, he thought, since he had looked at the sky with this feeling. "Thank you for today," Cozy Eye said. "I couldn't have done it without you." "I didn't do anything, really." Misumi shrugged. "Even if I had gone straight home and left you alone, Kiriyama was there, and he would have explained everything, you know? I can't take credit for it." "It's not like that," Cozy Eye said firmly. And then, "But I'm sorry." He lowered his head. "I made you tell me all that about your family. You're a good kid, but it was my decision to tell you, wasn't it?" Misumi laughed as if she were teasing him. Cozy Eye was bewildered by her composure. "Oh, is that why you're living with your grandmother? Because of your mom's affair?" "My parents got divorced because I uncovered the affair," Misumi said in an uninterested voice. "When I told my mother to stop having the affair, she just said, 'So I guess you caught me.' She didn't seem ashamed or anything, just like, 'You caught me, so I guess I'll stop being your mother.'" "Huh? What did she mean?" Cozy Eye asked, surprised. Misumi nodded. "It's crazy, right? But it's true. My father must have half guessed that she was cheating on him, too. He told me it didn't make sense for us to continue as a family after that, so they were going to split up. And that he didn't think I could depend on them anymore. Then they both went away somewhere." Cozy Eye's legs stopped of their own accord. Not knowing what to say, he desperately searched for words, but Misumi just said, "Don't worry about it," and kept walking. "They both say they'll take care of my college tuition and stuff like that, and my grandmother is happy to have me living with her. It all worked out fine." But wasn't it lonely?" Cozy Eye asked. "I know what you went through for your family." Just following his mother for the shortest time today had made his heart hurt like it might split in two. He had felt like he was going to cry at any moment the entire time, and had even considered running away. It was painful to imagine Misumi doing all that by herself, and then have her worst fears realized. "You tried as hard as you could, didn't you? Even though you hoped you were wrong. That it wouldn't end with a broken home, or anything like that." Cozy Eye's eyes grew hot. In response, Misumi shot him a cross look. "Don't get all weepy on me. That stuff is all over now." "But I don't think about it all anymore," Misumi said firmly. Cozy Eye was silenced by her show of strength. "Really, I don't think about it." She summoned a smile. "Then tonight," she continued, "when I saw your family, I thought, yes, I knew it, there had definitely been something wrong with mine. The mood was different. It all just made so much sense that it was almost funny." Misumi slapped Cozy Eye lightly on the back and laughed out loud. "Nakao, you're pretty popular among the girls in class, aren't you? Honestly, I didn't understand what they saw in you, but now I get it a little bit. It's this purity of yours, you know. What are you talking about? Girls? Popular? Why did she have to bring all that up now? Cozy Eye turned a little red, and even though it was dark out, it seemed Misumi noticed. You're so cute, she said, as if talking to a small animal. Okay. So, what kind of guy do you like, Misumi? What? Oh, that would be Koziki. She answered so coolly that Cozy Eye was at a loss for words. Misumi wasn't the slightest bit embarrassed. He's nice, isn't he? Koziki. You like Koziki? He asked. Yup. I really like him. Misumi nodded. What now? This was totally confusing. Cozy Eye felt a flutter in his stomach and frowned. His head, which had been clear until just a moment ago, felt as if it had been cloaked in a dense fog. He remembered feeling a little lonely yesterday when he thought that Misumi might like Koziki. That had just been because he didn't want to lose his friend. All I did today was confirm that prediction, so why do I feel so upset? Are you going to tell him? Cozy Eye's voice was so weak he surprised even himself. Misumi, who seemed not to notice, said, Yes, that's my plan. I want to get to know him better first. But that might be difficult. I made him angry the other day. Oh, about the photo? Yes. That photo gave me chills when I saw it. I couldn't believe there was a kid my age with that kind of sensibility. So I told him. Cozy Eye said, under his breath. She really liked Koziki's photo, he thought. The flutter in his stomach had turned into a weight that kept getting heavier. But I still don't know why he got so angry, you know? Misumi mused. Maybe I should ask why, and then I could apologize? Misumi sighed. There was something appealing about that sigh, and Cozy Eye's heart skipped a beat in spite of itself. Wait, why was he getting so worked up? Oh, I see Tenderness, Misumi said as the lights of the store appeared in the distance. This is far enough. No, it's fine. I'll walk you all the way there. If he didn't take her to the lift, at least, what was the point in coming all this way? After all, he was a man, wasn't he? More or less. He insisted, feeling a little flicker of something like pride. Misumi just said, well, okay. But then when they reached the car park, she gave a quick wave, said, bye, thanks, and ran off towards the building without looking back. With an empty feeling, Cozy Eye watched her go. Look who's here. Hello, Cozy Eye. It was Shiba, peering out from the doorway of the store. You're alone? What happened to Kiriyama? Oh, he's drinking with my dad. He may be a while. Right. I'm still working, so that's fine. Are you coming in? Shiba asked. Cozy Eye nodded. He entered the store and wandered the aisles aimlessly as he thought over what had just happened. I wonder what Misumi likes about Koziki. It must be that he's so grown up. If he had heard her story, there's no way he would have responded as stupidly as I did. He would have said something to make her feel better. Damn. Cozy Eye spoke out loud. It's pathetic. I admire Koziki so much he's like an idol to me, but the more I do, the smaller I feel. No, wait. Why am I obsessing over Misumi like this? Didn't she say I was popular with all the girls in class? I should focus on how good I am. But then, didn't Misumi also say that she didn't get why they thought I was good? Oh, what's the point anyway? He sagged, then sat down on the floor, right in the middle of an aisle. He rubbed his head with both hands and sighed. "Hey, lover boy. You're in the way." He looked up to find Sugi standing over him. "I'm seeing a lot of you today, Mitsuri Jr. It's Cozy Eye." He stood up. "Anyway, how about you, Tsugi? What are you doing here?" "I told Yoshiro I'd have a drink with him," Sugi said. "And I'm staying over at my brother's place, too." Snacks. Sugi held up his basket in his hand. There were a variety of foods in it. Cozy Eye let him know as well that Kiriyama was likely to be coming late. "That's fine," Sugi said. "He really came to meet with your mother, so we're just piling on. But here's something much more important. Did you know that they've got new improved Korean barbecue short ribs in the frozen food section? They're terrific. Delicious and really thick cut for starters." Sugi lifted the package out of his basket with enthusiasm and held it up for Cozy Eye, who ignored it and asked, "By the way, what was that before? When you called me lover boy, dot?" Sugi was looking over at the frozen foods, apparently thinking about buying an extra package of short ribs for himself. He glanced back at Cozy Eye. "Just calling it as I see it," he said. "I saw you and Misumi before from inside the store. You like her, I think. Don't you?" "What? Me like Misumi?" His jaw dropped, but Sugi just patted him on the shoulder. "She's a nice, level-headed kid, isn't she? You've got good taste." Cozy Eye could feel himself blushing as he thought about it. "Is that right? This is it? This is love?" Completely embarrassed, Cozy Eye fled the store. A cold wind caressed his flushed face. When he asked himself, he had to admit that what he was feeling seemed like love. But Misumi herself had told him straight out that she liked Koziki, so what could he do? On top of that, he wasn't a better man than Koziki in any way. If it was between the two of them, he'd have no chance. Once his face had cooled completely, he stood still and just breathed in and out. His frosty breath quickly dissolved into the darkness and disappeared. The suspension was lifted the following week, and classes resumed as normal. Cozy Eye hadn't seen Koziki for a while, so on the way to school, he reported that his mother hadn't been having an affair after all. "Well, that's good news, isn't it?" Koziki grinned. "Didn't I tell you it seemed unlikely?" "Yep. It was all my own mistake, completely." Scratching his head in embarrassment, Cozy Eye glanced at Koziki. He had thought about his friend while they were away. He wondered how he would react if Misumi confessed her feelings to him. He might think she was interesting and give her the thumbs up, but on the other hand, he might turn her down because it was a hassle. He didn't even really know what Koziki's type was in the first place, so it was hard for him to imagine. "But how did you find out it wasn't an affair?" asked Koziki. Well, Cozy Eye was about to say that he and Misumi had tailed his mother, but for some reason, he decided to hold his tongue. He wasn't sure why. He just didn't want to say it. So, as he explained, he left out the part about meeting Misumi. She brought the guy home. It turns out he's like her manga apprentice. It wasn't a lie. Still, he felt a little guilty about it. It was like he was hiding something, which didn't feel good. Like he owed an apology to Koziki, who was listening intently to the story, with no way of knowing he was hiding anything. Interesting. So he was an instructor at a juku and then became a manga artist? What kind of stuff does he do online? For now, he said he's just going to upload the work he's already done. He showed me some of it, and it had a nice feel to it. It didn't follow any of the latest trends, and to be honest, it was a little, well, corny. But there was something pleasantly nostalgic about it that Cozy I liked. Still, the storyline was somewhat lacking, and he had the feeling that one of the episodes had been lifted from something he had seen somewhere before. His mother might have felt the same, because she had advised the guy to focus on the artwork and get someone else to write the story. He stayed here for around 3 days. I wasn't busy because school was out, so I hung out with him a lot, and he's the perfect teacher. When he explains things, he's super easy to understand. I want to try to meet with him before our final exams. Apparently, Kiriyama was a Japanese language instructor. He taught middle school students, so he had a tremendous store of knowledge, as one might expect, and was clever at explaining things. When Cozy Eye had asked for help with an essay he had neglected about the story Mayheim from his assigned reading, Kiriyama had been so dramatic and clear in his explanation of the main points of the story that Cozy Eye was actually moved and had no trouble writing the essay. I couldn't help saying it would be a real waste for him to give up teaching. Hey, Koziki. You okay? Koziki had suddenly fallen silent. Cozy Eye looked at him. That might work, don't you think? His friend murmured pensively. Say he went through all the literary classics, first to last, and turned them into manga. And told you, just remember this or that part, like he's preparing you for college entrance exams? That sort of thing. Oh. Cozy Eye remembered a picture book from their elementary school library, full of biographies of important historical figures. Back then, he would read it to pass the time when it was raining too hard for them to play outdoors. It was pretty interesting. He had learned about Thomas Edison and Oda Nobunaga from that book. Maybe it could be something like that, but with Kiriyama's art and his own teaching style. It could be good. And then, if you could read it easily on a smartphone, that would be even better. It made perfect sense, Cozy Eye thought, impressed. That'd be awesome, he said to Koziki. He was always coming up with things like that. Well, that kind of thing has been around forever. There are so many different works of that type available now. I just thought he'd at least want to start by focusing on his strengths. I think that's really good advice. Hey, is it okay if I tell Kiriyama? Sure, if you want. But even if he does them, there's no guarantee they'll be popular. It will depend on his adaptations. I'll contact Kiriyama later, Cozy I thought. Princess Yanaga and Mimio would probably work really well in that format. He was grinning when he felt a pat on the back. He turned. Misumi was standing there. Morning, Nakao. Good morning, Koziki. Good morning, Cozy I stuttered, flustered. Misumi overtook the two boys and just as quickly left them behind. Perhaps rushing to meet a friend, she waved and dashed into the station building. Misumi hardly ever says hello or anything like that, Koziki said with surprise. True, Cozy I acknowledged. He thought she might have called out because of what had happened the other day, but in the back of his mind there was a voice telling him that she just wanted to speak with Koziki. Koziki, what do you think of Misumi? The question slipped out before he could think, and he instantly regretted it. He hadn't planned to ask, but now that he had, he needed to hear the answer. He looked at Koziki, trying hard to hide his agitation, and the latter simply yawned, as if he hadn't a care in the world. Not interested. Although Kozai had been seized by a great anxiety, he took pains to respond in a dull voice, as if he were stuck in class during a boring lesson. Oh. Yeah. A car passed by Kozai, too close for comfort. Look out, Koziki exclaimed, yanking him by the arm. And then, after a moment, he said, "To be honest, I don't like that type." Oh? Misumi, you mean? Yeah. I hate when people force their feelings on someone that way. Koziki said it so definitively that a small ache started somewhere in Kozai's heart. Oh, that's... I might, like her. Maybe, that is, I mean. Misumi. The words trickled out, drop by drop. Koziki's eyes widened, but then he simply said, "I see." Why? Why did I say that? Kozai spent the rest of the day in agony. He shouldn't have said anything. Why had he opened his big mouth? To head off Koziki? No, impossible. His friend had already said that he wasn't interested in her. Then why? Sixth period would be over any minute now. Kozai watched Misumi's back, diagonally in front of him. She'd probably be sad if she knew that Koziki had said that she wasn't his type. Because even if she told him how she felt, she'd be rejected in the end. So, wait, maybe he was just trying to console her in his imagination? I like you, even if he doesn't? But what kind of consolation was that? Kozai was surprised to discover that his heartache hadn't subsided. The previous version of himself, the one who just a few days ago was snorting in derision at love and longing, had vanished from view, nowhere to be found. Then, a few days later, and surprisingly quickly, everything came to a head. Misumi confessed her feelings to Koziki and was flatly rejected. Tabuchi told Kozai about it. Misumi was crying like crazy in front of Majiko Station, and everyone was saying that he must have been really harsh to make her cry like that. Tabuchi seemed a little incensed. Tabuchi was invariably sweet to all the girls, and whether he broke up with them or vice versa, none of them ever had a bad word to say about him. This must have been hard for him to swallow. What? Kozai exclaimed. When was that? Yesterday evening, Tabuchi said. Yesterday, Koziki had said that he was going to see his dentist in Kokura, so they had gone home separately. And today, Misumi hadn't come to school. You're friends with that guy, aren't you, Kozai? Why don't you tell him he was out of line? It seemed that was all Tabuchi had to say, and after he finished, he returned to his own classroom. Kozai started to stand up, then sat back down again. Koziki had seemed his normal self this morning, and he hadn't mentioned anything about it. Why hadn't he told him? Was it because I said I liked Misumi? Maybe he was just trying to be tactful. Although it would have been nice if he had said something. Because I knew about Misumi's feelings. Kozai turned to the girl sitting next to him and said, "Sorry, I'm not feeling well. I'd better go home." He started to pack up his things. "Are you okay?" she asked, and he gave a perfunctory nod before leaving the classroom. To get to the cubbies where students kept their outdoor shoes, he had to pass by the neighboring classroom. He tried to slip by quickly, but Koziki was in the hallway. "You going home? Are you okay?" Oh, yeah. I'm not feeling well. Sorry. He wanted to talk to Koziki, or no, maybe he didn't. In the grip of emotions that he didn't fully understand, Cozy ducked round his friend and left. He went straight to the Golden Villa building. He had made it all the way to the lift before he realized he didn't know Misumi's room. He didn't even know what he'd say when he saw her. He was staring blankly into space when he heard a voice. Nakao. He roused himself with a start. It was Misumi, a Tenderness shopping bag dangling from one hand. She was wearing black-rimmed glasses. So her eyes were actually bad, Cozy thought to himself. What are you doing here? Hey, I heard about yesterday, so. He mumbled, and Misumi nodded as if she understood. You ditched school, didn't you? She said. Mitsuri's shift is starting now, so let's take off. She pointed outside. The two of them started to walk and somehow found themselves headed towards the waterfront. Misumi broke the pork bun that she had bought into 2 pieces and gave half to Cozy. They bit into the steaming hot buns. It seems that I liked him quite a bit, Misumi said brightly, but the koziki that I liked was my own invention. What do you mean? Misumi stuffed the remainder of the steamed bun into her mouth, swallowed, and then slowly began to speak. There was an ideal koziki, but he was just inside of me. I thought he looked at the world with a detached gaze and had the composure not to be manipulated by his own emotions. I thought he was strong, that he had a fearless, resolute spirit. Why did you think that? Have you seen Koziki's photo? The one that won the award? It was titled Fear. Cozy nodded. The other day, he had dug up a copy of the newspaper with the photo, which their middle school had proudly distributed to all the students back then. He'd wanted to take a closer look at the photo that Misumi had described so passionately. It was simple, in a manner of speaking. An old dog on its side lifted its head, gazing at the person on the far side of the lens. That was a photo of Koziki's dog, just before it died. I could see it so clearly in its eyes, despair and the fear of death. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, even dogs are afraid of death. Then later, I noticed how Koziki had captured his own dog's fear so calmly. It gave me chills. This person can see the world free of love and emotion, I thought. That made a huge impact on me. Thanks to that photo, I was able to see my parents the way I needed to, detached from my own feelings. Misumi said it was hard for her to express how much that photo had meant to her. When she pressed the shutter button to capture her mother entering the Love Hotel with the other man, she was able to free herself from her emotions. She thought, oh, this is what they call perspective, and she imagined that what Koziki saw must be a more noble version of the same thing. It was only because she had Koziki's photograph that she was able to achieve that kind of perspective. Misumi and Cozy made their way towards the Majiko Retro Observatory. There, the top floor of a high-rise apartment building designed by a famous architect had been opened to the public as an observation platform. It overlooked all of the Majiko Retro area, with the Kanmon Bridge spanning the straits off in the distance. Perhaps because it was a weekday, the place was nearly empty, so the two of them took the bench with the best view. Cozy handed Misumi a can of hot milk tea that he had purchased en route and opened one of his own. The sweet steam tickled his nose. Yesterday evening I happened to see Koziki alone, Misumi said, so I just decided to talk to him. I wanted to ask him why he got so mad the other day, and then I also wanted him to know how I felt. But when I told him about it, the same way I told you just now, he got really angry. Misumi smiled sadly as she opened the tab on her can of tea with a little pop. He said, "I didn't take the picture like that." I think he also said life and love are not that easy, or something like that. He had looked at her with contempt and spat out, "You're the worst." That really shocked me, and I'm afraid I ended up making a terrible scene. I was crying so much. I didn't understand why he had to say a thing like that, and more than anything, I guess I just thought he'd understand how I felt. But those were just my own selfish ideas, weren't they? Misumi took a sip of tea and added, "It was dumb of me. Although I shouldn't have got my hopes up." Chico was the dog they got as a companion for Koziki when he was born, Kozai said in a subdued voice. She was like a little sister to him. He doted on her. The reason he first took up the camera was to take photos of her. From elementary school on, watching Koziki take Chico for her walk was an everyday occurrence. On rainy days and snowy days as well, there was Koziki, walking happily along with Chico, stopping to take photos of the dog, the camera dangling from a strap around his neck. Koziki wasn't the one to send that photo to the newspaper either. His mother thought it was so good that she submitted the photo on her own. When notice of the award came to the school and he learned what his mother had done, he was furious. He refused to accept the award, and nothing his teacher or the school principal could say would persuade him to change his mind. At the time I didn't know that Chico had died, Kozai continued. So I thought it was strange he wouldn't accept the award. I told Koziki I thought it was a good photo. But when I did, he yelled at me, "What the hell is good about it?" Looking at the copy of the photo, Kozai thought back to his second year of middle school. He had just thought it was a good photo. A normal, everyday photo. So he had told Koziki so. I thought Chico was just looking at Koziki the way she always did. I told Koziki, "I don't see anything in her eyes except your reflection." Then suddenly Koziki's shoulders relaxed. After that, he agreed to accept the award. And he titled the photo Fear. Later I learned the photo was taken when Chico was dying. I think the title was describing Koziki's own feelings. I think he was afraid because this being who had been with him since he was born, who relied upon him and gazed at him always with trust in her eyes, was leaving the world. I'm sure Koziki pressed the shutter because he didn't want to lose that and was trying to hold on to it somehow. Kozai sipped his tea and continued. I think that's why Koziki got so mad when people called him cool-headed and things like that. Misumi toyed with her can of tea, then abruptly looked out through the window, off into the distance. He's definitely different from what I imagined. I had expected him to be less sentimental. I understand your feelings about Koziki. I also understand what a big deal it is to have someone cool-headed with you in a hard situation. When you came along with me the other day, it was a huge help. I'm glad you were there. Misumi returned her gaze to Kozai, who continued. But wouldn't it be different if I told you? I think you're cool because you're strong and unsentimental. If I said that's why I like you, wouldn't it bother you? I think that's why Koziki got mad. Misumi looked at Kozai for a while, then suddenly stood up and quietly said, "Nakao, you really like to talk about yourself, don't you?" She placed her half-empty can on her seat. "Or are you just bragging about how much better you know Koziki than I do?" "Well, you don't have to be such a jerk about it. Actually, it's really irritating." "Huh? Oh, I'm leaving," Misumi said. Before he could stop her, she had stepped into the lift and disappeared. What? Why? He didn't understand why Misumi was so mad. He stood up several times, only to sit down again immediately, uncertain if he should chase after her. Then he heard a low chuckle. "Huh? Koziki? What was going on?" Suddenly, Koziki was standing there. "You left school with such a grim look on your face, I was worried." With an amused smile, Koziki picked up the can that Misumi had left there. "That's no good, leaving that there. I'll toss it later." Still holding the can, Koziki sat down next to Kozai. Then he said, "Thank you." "What for?" "I heard what you said to Misumi. And I realized that I never said thank you back then in 8th grade. Thank you for understanding that photograph." Kozai had been half out of his seat, but hearing the serious tone of voice, he sat down once again. "What?" He drank some more of his tea. "It's not something to thank me for. Chico's photo just looked that way, that's all." "That's all, you say? But you're the only one who understood," Koziki said earnestly. "You're the only one who understands, so you're the only one who doesn't ask me about it." That's a great gift. Now it was Koziki's turn to look out through the window. A gap that wasn't there before opened in the heavy winter clouds, and a small patch of blue sky became visible. When Chico was dying, I was really scared. So scared I didn't know what to do. I wondered what would happen if this clear-eyed creature disappeared from the world, and then I pressed the button. As you said, I just wanted to hold on to her. All I could think about was how to keep her with me. Koziki's hand was clenched around the can of tea, his fingertips white. When Chico's photo came out in public, lots of people said I was cold. I couldn't understand it. I started to wonder if I was a terrible person, peering through my camera when this life that was so important to me was vanishing. Also, I wondered if it made Chico sad that I was taking this photo for myself. After that, I couldn't carry the camera around any longer. It was the first time he had heard this confession from Koziki. But strangely, it didn't feel new at all. It felt like something that he had always seen, if only vaguely, veiled in mist, which had now emerged clearly, revealing its true form at last. And then he felt a twinge of remorse. He had thought Koziki was so grown up, but the two of them had worried and suffered in similar ways. He believed he understood, so he never talked to him about it, but that only meant those cares were piling up inside his friend somewhere. He should have helped let them out somehow. I was asking for Koziki's advice on every little thing, he thought, so if I had thought about it just a little I would have understood. I'm not really the only one who understands you. Besides, it's not like I was keeping my mouth shut on purpose. I just didn't know how to ask. That's not such a brilliant reason. Koziki chuckled. It's good enough, he said. That's why I feel comfortable around you. The gentle tone in his voice made Kozai happy. I guess I must have been of some help to him somehow. I suppose that's why I respond so angrily when someone tries to push their own impressions on me that way. Like Misumi. I'm sorry about that, by the way. You really liked her, didn't you? He had almost forgotten. Misumi had called him irritating. It was too late to do anything about it now, but it made Cozy Eye a little sad. Still, it was clear Misumi liked Koziki anyway, so there was nothing he could do about it. I'm okay, he said. It's no big deal. Maybe there's still a chance for us to become closer someday. Besides, for now, it's okay. It would be nice to find someone who likes the same photos as me and for the same reasons. Cozy Eye thought of the photo albums in his living room and his parents, looking at them with a shared smile on their faces. I want someone who can do that with me for a long, long time. Right. Me too, I think. Koziki suddenly grinned. Then he stood up and said, "Why don't we get some ramen?" My treat. Seriously? Why? It doesn't matter. If it's a problem, you can pay for yourself. Hey, wait. I accept. I'm hungry. Please. Cozy Eye stood up in a hurry, and Koziki laughed out loud. I like you, that's for sure. The advent cookies for 24 foot were in the shape of pink hearts. What are you staring at? Cozy Eye was looking at the cookie he had been handed when an arm reached out from behind the checkout counter and snatched it away. When it was returned to him, it had been broken ruthlessly in half. That's mean. Why do you keep doing that? He put the cookie in his pocket. These cookie attacks were getting on his nerves, but when he said so to Misumi, who was behind the checkout counter, she averted her gaze coldly. I suppose I'm annoyed for some reason. Why are you two here? It was Christmas Eve. Cozy Eye had come to Tenderness to do some shopping with Koziki, and Misumi was there working. It was a little awkward meeting her at the register. Winter break had started that day, and the two boys were going to celebrate by playing video games all night. A big role-playing game had been released 3 days earlier, and they were hoping to clear all the levels in record time, but somehow he got the feeling that Misumi didn't want to hear about all that. Misumi, who was wearing a Santa hat, scowled the whole time they were there and seemed to be in a bad mood. Did I do something wrong? Oh, be quiet, she growled. You're getting on my nerves. Cozy Eye felt a slight pain in his chest. He didn't feel he had done anything to deserve this. Cozy Eye, if you've paid, let's go. Koziki didn't so much as glance at Misumi, and that only seemed to make her angrier. She glared at him, but Koziki didn't seem to notice. Now. Is this a fight? The voice belonged to Tsugi. When Misumi realized who it was, a broad smile spread across her face. Welcome, Mr. Tsugi. It's Christmas Eve. Shouldn't you be spending it with your girlfriend? Ain't got nobody. Tsugi shrugged his shoulders casually, and Misumi's face lit up. That can't be true. But if you really don't, I nominate myself. No thanks. I'm not into younger women. What? Cozy Eye thought in surprise. Is she after him now? Tsugi turned to him. Cozy Eye, you're flying solo too, aren't you? Cozy Eye gestured towards Koziki, and Tsugi laughed. He slung his arm over the boy's shoulder. In that case, let's get something to eat. Are you free? Then you two should join me. I'll call Mitsuri. Really? Are you kidding? It was Cozy Eye's first time hanging out with Tsugi, so he was excited. He was really curious to know what kind of person he was. He glanced at Koziki, who nodded silently. Yes, please. We'd love to go, he said, but feeling a little funny. He stole a glance at Misumi, who was glaring at him as if she could shoot poison darts from her eyes. Nakao, you really make me mad. A poison dart sank deep into his chest. But still, he was happy to be hanging out with Sugi. See you, Misumi. Merry Christmas. Cozy Eye smiled at Misumi, but she stuck out her tongue at him with some intensity. Right. Let's go. They followed Sugi out of the store. Something cold brushed Cozy Eye's cheek, and he looked up. Snowflakes were drifting down on them. Wow. A white Christmas. And I'm hanging out with high school boys. Not very sexy, is it? Sugi let loose with a hearty laugh. I guess you got dumped. Well, there are plenty of fish in the sea. Uh-huh. You got me. You must have been in love a few times, too, haven't you, Tsugi? Cozy Eye was still looking up at the night sky as he asked, but there was no reply. Sugi's laughter had ceased. Cozy Eye looked over at him curiously, and Sugi, too, was gazing upwards into the night. His eyes were gentle and sad in a way that Cozy Eye had never seen before. Not me. Not anymore. Sugi's sigh left a long, white trail that melted into the night sky. Cozy Eye wondered what could have happened to him. He wanted to ask, but couldn't. He returned his gaze to the heavens and said nothing. Until recently, I thought that love and longing didn't exist. But love existed long before I was born, and longing was there in me too. It was there in Misumi, and love and longing were definitely there in Sugi. The world is overflowing with it. And maybe one day I'll know love. I'll pine for love and lose it. I'll laugh and cry over it, and maybe like my parents did, I'll find a way to keep it. Even if that's still far off in my future. Sugi, love is pretty awesome, isn't it? Sugi laughed heartily. If you say so, high school boy. Ask Santa and maybe he'll bring you some. The wind blew and Cozy Eye shivered. Involuntarily, he put his hand in his pocket and touched his heart.